Hello, everyone, and welcome to Transforming Today Show. I'm your host, Rebecca Weintraub, and I'm an intuition coach. I help people discover, develop, and strengthen their intuition. And today I have the pleasure of having Christine Conforti with me. How are you, Christine?
Hi, Rebecca. I'm awesome.
Awesome.
I'm excited to be here. Thank you.
Today.
Yes, we have a funny plant story of why I'm getting all the good nature energy, even when I'm inside.
I know, Christine, is nature.
Well, it's funny, the first time we talked, I was literally staring at an ocean with genuine sunlight. And, part of what will come out today is probably this more nomadic alternative lifestyle. And I am in one of those moments where I can't fully control all of my conditions. And so you have to kind of work on the inside rather than just it always being perfect on the outside. So I'm really grateful for this plant.
Where did you get it?
The truth is there was an empty pot in this apartment that my boyfriend's renting, and we bought a second plant and just plopped it in. If you looked into it, you would notice it's not actually fully potted. So that's a to-do for the weekend, find a shovel. So we got it at the supermarket up the street.
So it's real, at least.
Oh, it's a real plant. Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, okay.
That was one of the benefits of this apartment, is there's a lot of plants in it. And one of our assignments is to water them faithfully. So I'm getting a different version of nature. Usually for me, it's being outside in the sun at the beach. And we'll probably talk about why that is important to my version of thriving. So I'm kind of getting this lesson on nature is many different things. And sometimes it's learning how to take care of plants inside your home.
I love that because it makes me think about my aunt. My aunt is obsessed with topiaries and greenery. And if you go into her house, she's so creative and she's such a great decorator, but I'm a minimalist. If you look at my walls, I might have a picture on one wall, a picture on this wall. And that's just because I've moved so many times. Yeah. And so through moving, you just kind of keep purging as you go. If you walk into her house, it's like Home Goods threw up in the best possible way all over her house. And in every room, there's at least 10 topiaries.
Is a topiary, is that a plant?
It's greenery that they I think it's greenery that's fake, and then they put it in a pot, and then they trim it almost as if it were a bonsai tree, but it's put in round balls. And I mean,
that's so funny because I actually love Home Goods, and if and when I ever have my own home, which will be a tiny home, it will be furnished by Home Goods. I just love anything, those very inspirational quotes that are sometimes very cheesy and overdone, but so true. There will be many of those in the final home, if and when I ever have that.
What's funny is my husband is really into personal growth, and so am I, but we kind of came from two opposite sides coming together. I came from the therapy, spiritual, coaching side, and he came from the motivational speaker, rah, set a goal side. So it's been really interesting to kind of marry the two sides. And so when I met him, he had maybe 10 motivational posters from Bed Bath & Beyond and Home Goods, and I had a few. So I think we ended up donating them all because they didn't feel right in the home that we're in now. But I don't know, that makes me laugh. So, but yeah, they're some of them, if you look at, we have one that we kept and it says, "Be awesome today." And it's right above a mirror. So every time that you look in the mirror, we're seeing "Be awesome today." And I think that's a really powerful message for both of us.
Well, it's interesting because before we officially recorded here, I was telling you, by the way, the official name of my business is Unbounded Lifestyle. And there's actually a story to that related to this, which is 4 years ago, and I was living in California, and I was in my phase, every 6 months, I literally feel like I've lived a different life. But that was a life where I just started coaching. I moved out to California, and I was really into CrossFit. And that was actually my core of community there, which is one of the 8 areas of life that I kind of teach and coach on, and I'm writing a book on, and that will come up today. But so community was that was my anchor. And there was this incredible quote on the CrossFit gym wall. And it starts with, "We live unbound." And I don't have it on my website right now, but sometimes when I'm, kind of writing a coaching proposal or invitation, like I, for a long time, I added at the end, because it goes on to just say, like, essentially there's an energy inside of us that's unseen. And when you tap it, you literally are unbound. And I just saw that was very much in this fitness realm. And I was like, oh my God, this is exactly what I'm doing on this emotional, spiritual level through coaching. And like, yes, physical health is part of that. And so in some ways, like, and as I'll share about my journey, like, it did really start actually with an outer physical health that then opened up this mental clarity, and now really this deep spiritual groundedness that's almost so profound. I don't fully know what to do with all of it. But it kind of came from like that goal-oriented motivational world. So I think there is such parallels between those two. And so long as we can figure out how to be a bridge between goals and purpose and spiritual intentions and all that kind of stuff, like, it's beautiful to be able to speak both languages. And that's certainly something that I do. For a long time, I was articulating or identifying as like having one foot in the business world and one foot in the spirit world. And I still feel that, as much as I feel a little bit more pulled towards the spirit world. I think in some ways we all are, and it could be just the type of people that are walking into my life. But I almost feel like the urgency of this moment is to be more of the spirit. I just feel like I hear the word purpose and universe like a lot more casually in conversations than I did 4 or 5 years ago. And I think that's an amazing thing, because at the end of the day, that is what connects all of us. And that's the true meaning of life, is realizing that we're kind of beyond all of this. So I don't want to get too wooey right now, but the point is, like, I think it's part woo and part, savvy business creativity. Like, I aspire to have both, and I'm not perfect at all. So it's this constant dance between the two. But it all started with a motivational quote in a CrossFit gym. It's kind of where my whole coaching story starts.
I love that. So take us back before that. What led you up until that point? Talk about some of those transitions you mentioned, kind of feeling like you lived a different life every 6 months. Like,
Yeah.
I'm curious to know what before that looked like, and then how you led up to that point of where you are now, and now you're coaching other people, sharing what you've learned.
Yeah. So this is interesting, because I just shared this story with 2 friends from high school who I recently connected with. And it was the first time probably in 5 years I actually like retold that story, which now literally feels like it was a different life. So I grew up in New Jersey. I kind of identify as a, upper middle class, well-educated. My dad told me, go to any college that you want. We weren't rich by any means, but like my family saw the value of education. And, I went to Georgetown in DC and had like this prestigious education. And that led me to a lot of leadership positions, and ultimately a job at the United Nations. So I worked for the UN Global Compact, which what I thought at that moment, and I was 23, 24 when this happened, was my dream job. So in terms of, kind of like putting into practice everything that I learned and everything I thought was expected of me, working for the UN, I thought was it. And then I started, and the first year was really engaging and challenging and interesting. I also had a gut feeling that I was seeing other things in the way that the organization operated that didn't fully kind of resonate, but my intuition and authenticity and sense of self wasn't that strong at that moment. I mean, I've always been a very confident, relentless kind of person. And so I've had a strong sense of sovereignty, but I was still in that like very explorative, I was young. It was my second professional job. So long story short, like very shortly after the first year, which really what happened was I was hired to lead a project within the organization. And so it almost felt like I was an entrepreneur, I think now is the technical word. So I was like hired to be a project manager on this technology platform we were building. No one else knew what I was doing. Like, I was basically hired because my boss was smart and could tell that she could pay me a lot less than the consultants that they were paying. And so that was really fun, building and creating. And I hired a designer and a technologist, and I was working with the internal team. And then we launched it. And that's kind of where almost True Colors came out of the organization and the team I was working with, which was a lot more of a emphasis on like launching things, coming up with a new idea, and not so much attention into making something very effective and having a true impact on the final lives or the final issues we were talking about. I mean, this is all about, you know, sustainable development goals and corporate social responsibility, like really timely, important stuff. And I don't, you know, I kind of, I'm checking myself right now. Like, I don't want to tell the story at all to take away from that work or that organization or the UN. Like, there are incredible people doing incredible work across a range of issues. I think my point is, the moment I realized there was a too big of gap between what I was showing up to do every day and being able to see and know that it was truly having an impact on something that mattered. And now I realized that was aligned with my values, which are things like sustainability and connection, and community, and all of these things. It was really hard to keep my head down and keep going. So it was like this like first moment of awakeness came up when I realized, like, oh, I care about this more than the person who hired me to do it. Like, that's kind of weird and interesting. And then, of course, you know, typical office politics and bureaucracy comes in. And on top of, at that moment, I was living outside of New York in Hoboken, New Jersey, and I was doing the commute. And like, there were a lot of things at one time where I was realizing, like, oh, like this isn't really me. Something about this, like, it's just not working. And so I really had to, you know, to speak to the transition. And I think a lot of transitions in my life can come down to, like, there was just a moment, like a morning of now I would use the word intuition, or I just had this idea and I went with it. So I wake up one morning, you know, before the morning commute to New York, and I'm like, I'm going to ask my boss to let me go to Brazil. And the context is we were working on a project in 4 different countries, and Brazil was one of them. And also, my first boyfriend at the time was a Brazilian man who every couple months was going back there. So like, I kind of had a little bit of a personal reason to be interested. But I walked to my boss's office and I was like, this is either crazy or brilliant. But I think we should send me to Brazil instead of hiring a UN volunteer on the ground, which is what the project entailed. And I kind of outlined how it was going to save us $75,000, and, you know, all of the sort of soft skill reasons why it would be valuable for someone from the New York team to go to a local network office in Brazil. And long story short, she said yes. So part of my transition was somehow being able to feel and listen to my intuition. What I would say is, like, feel the fear and do it anyway. Like, walking in, now I realize having courage, even though like no one worked remotely at that time. Like, by no means I have had the confidence to have said that, but I did. And that's the part that I felt like, you know, I was channeling something that was telling me, like, no, you're meant to go somewhere else. So to make a long story short, which probably still won't be a short story, that led me to move to Brazil for what at the moment was going to be a 2-month project. And that's when I started working remotely. So I was keeping this job that, again, thought was my dream job on all other surface levels, was like elite and well paid and yada, 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 whatever else one would stay on something for like an external reason. But now I got the time freedom that I wanted. So I moved to Brazil and I was living in Sao Paulo. And then I started to get that taste of freedom. And I was very grateful at the time to not have to report to an office and to just sort of be able to do things in my own way, on my own timeline. At the same time, I was very mindful of I've always been very confident in showing up in my work in that role. But of course, I was like even more on top of things because I wanted to, I guess, prove that the model worked, which it did. So eventually, when I was meant to go back to New York, I basically had another moment of courage where I had to tell my boss truly what was going on for me. And I said, I really don't want to come back to New York. I'm really loving living in Brazil and I want to stay here. I want to stay with my relationship. And I think I actually positioned it as a question. I said, is this working for you? And she said, yeah. And I said, great. So we continued it. And so that gave me another 9 months of working remotely. And then what really happened was in that space, over time, at the same time, having the frustration of seeing the reality of the ineffectiveness and the things that weren't really resonating with me and how I like to do work and the impact I wanted to have in the office, led me to having a lot of time to question what I was doing. I had a moment where I felt like I was a slave to my email, and that didn't feel good. And then I had those recurring moments of like, wow, I believe in this more than the founder of this organization. That's really interesting. Imagine what I could do if I put this amount of energy into something I was really passionate about or that I truly owned. And then another moment came where I had that like moment of conviction. And that moment was, I'm never going to work for anyone else again. And, you know, knock on wood, I never say never. I have no idea what opportunity will come into my life. But I think the intention, energy behind that was, I want to learn how to be self-sufficient. I want to have the freedom to do the work that I love to do and not have to show up and have a job because I feel like I need it to survive, or for my happiness, or for my sense of recognition and success and all these things. So that was around March. So I go to Brazil in November. Around March, I'm like, okay, I'm going to leave this job. So I have a contract that ran through October, and I decided internally, like, I'm not going to renew the contract. And then I had to figure out, well, if I'm going to start a business, what the hell am I going to do? Because I didn't have a business idea at that moment. I didn't really know anything about coaching. It's not like I knew I was going to leave to be a coach. And so the universe works in funny ways. I have a good girlfriend who I still connect with in masterminds, who's an entrepreneur herself. And she introduced me to 2 blogs to follow. One was Danielle Laporte, who I still read today. One was this woman named Marie Forleo, who was a phenomenal teacher for me at that time. And she was running a program called B School. And her whole tagline is create a business and life that you love, which was obviously very much in line with what I was seeking in that time. And it was a 2-month virtual business coaching program, you know, borderline like training. I know she calls herself like an educational company. And it was all about how to start and run an online business. And honestly, before I even started the program, there was this one resource that I still share with my clients to this day who are in a similar space of, I want to be an entrepreneur, but I don't know what I want to do. And the resource was called Start the Right Business. And it was this simple self-coaching process. Like, it's maybe 50 pages long. There were actual exercises in there to brainstorm every business idea you've ever had and go through like this methodical litmus test of like, what truly is the right one to start. And simultaneously, I was reading, funny enough, in Portuguese, because I was trying to practice a new language I was picking up, a book by Chris Guillebeau called $100 Startup. And what I got from that book was the simplicity of business. Like, business is an exchange of value. If you give something valuable and someone gives you money in return, you have a business. And I mean, he profiled a lot of great entrepreneurs that are very different from like the Techstar way I think we think about startups and business and all that stuff. And it was like, hey, if you walk dogs and people pay you, like, you have a dog walking business. And so there was just this like groundswell of possibility and confidence that came from like hearing 2 women talk about like, you know, you can create a life that you love and a business that you love. And then this guy profiling all these very, what we would call, I guess, you know, normal, typical people, like really being self-sufficient, being creative in their own world, and figuring out a way to make a living without having to be an employee. And something about that was just so what I needed. So at the end of Start the Right Business, somehow coaching came out as the business I should start. Again, that's another thing where I think part of it was like intuitive. Like, I almost, and to this day, like, I can't fully logically tell you, like, this is why I coach. This is why I'm a coach. So I think it was part, like, there was space for the calling to come out. Partly it was very savvy. Like, it doesn't take much money to start a coaching business. Actually, to do it really well, it does take investment in yourself, which came a little bit later. So I really started with the decision, I want my own business. Then I had a couple months of going through the fear of actually leaving the job, for the reasons I mentioned: financial stability, that sense of like recognition, the sense of like traditional success. Like, am I really going to leave all that behind? And the answer was consistently yes. Like, I'm willing to leave this. And I used a phrase that I use now every time that I move to a different place around the world, which is, if I like it, I'll stay. If I don't, I'll leave. And I think the application of that mantra to that point, to that decision, was like, nothing's really probably going to change that much here. Like, this office will be here, this work will be here. No one can take away all of the accomplishments and the education and the projects and successes I've had to this point. No one can destroy the very positive relationships I've made. So I think focusing on gratitude for all of the success and the support I had around me, and trusting that, like, if I went and did this experiment and I failed, and by failure there, I mean, I just realized it wasn't actually a fit for me, or I wasn't cut out, I didn't have the skill sets or the mindset. Like, I could go back to this. And I really did believe that in the time. Now, I've never chosen to do that. And in some ways, I've sort of very far removed myself from more of the formal institutions I've worked for. And that's its own discussion if that was the right or wrong decision. But I kind of have never looked back. And I have a friend who works in New York who we've done a little informal coaching together. And he's kind of in the same point of his transition where I just see him so badly wanting to take the leap to start his own thing. Again, it might be in consultancy, something, not inventing the next new, like, Facebook, but just being a self-sufficient solo entrepreneur, I think would be the right word. And he often will ask me, like, do you regret leaving? Like, do you miss that world? Do you miss the UN? And I'm consistently like, no, I don't. And I'm so grateful that I have that sense of peace. So that just tells me that I made the absolute right decision. So that was the first big major change. And that was in 2014. So I guess a little over 4 years ago. That then just, like, blew open the door for all these different changes. So to sort of, like, finish the connecting the dots somewhat to where I'm sitting today, I ended up leaving the job. I ended up interviewing a couple coaches and asking, like, well, how do you start a coaching business? Because at that time I was applying what I was learning in the business coaching program, which was, interview people you think you'd love to work with and help, and interview people who are doing this really well. So through my university network, I watched, like, 3 career webinars, and I, followed up with some comments on what I really appreciated, and asked each coach if they would just have a 30-minute call, like alumni. And all of them told me 2 things. One was that when they went full time in on coaching, that's when it started to take off, when they stopped sort of doing 2 things at once. And then the second was that when they got their own coach, everything started to take off. So I was like, okay, step 2, I need to get my own coach. And then kind of the universe played another role. And that same girlfriend who shared the blogs with me told me that there was a coach that she'd worked with for a month. And she had seen on Facebook that the coach had a couple slots open to work with new beginning coaches. So I ended up meeting this woman named Monica Day, who's based in Philadelphia. And we worked together for over 3 years, and a lot of, everything just sort of snowballed in the most beautiful way from there. So I made a decision to wholeheartedly commit to this different entrepreneurial life. I made a decision to invest in myself in the highest level of time, energy, and finances, which included moving home for 9 months in that phase of life. And I say the same thing to my clients. By no means is that the only way, but, like, you kind of have a few ways to do a transition like this. You either very much scale back your expenses and maybe your freedom in some ways, and kind of go live at home, or you do the side hustle. Those are kind of probably the 2 main ones that I see. I didn't have the energy or the interest in the side hustle. So I chose to sort of be a hermit for 9 months, figure out coaching, coach my ass off, get a lot of my own coaching done. And then the practice started to build itself there. I have huge gratitude and appreciation, and owe a lot of credit to not only my coaching confidence, but my skill, to the Prosperous Coach and that community. Rich Litvin and Steve Chandler are the co-authors of that book. And I coached in one of Rich's leadership groups. And I mean, I developed exponentially as a human, as a coach, and as an entrepreneur in that program by just simply having all of my, not only limiting beliefs, but honestly, my arrogance being questioned. And at the same time, my sense of not being good enough being questioned, which is funny because those are kind of 2 sides of that same part of inauthenticity. Like, either you're coming off very arrogant and you're better than people, or you feel like you're less than people, but it's still coming from not being fully aligned. So So all of that just gave me the confidence, one deep conversation at a time, which is what the Prosperous Coach teaches. And it truly is, in my experience, in my world, like the only way to really build a sustainable, meaningful coaching practice is to just invest in deep conversations with people. And so that's what my day looks like mostly now. If I'm not in deep conversations, I'm focusing on my healthy lifestyle tools, which I'm using in the coaching, like yoga and cooking and meditating and journaling. And, to some people, my lifestyle might be incredibly boring. And for me, it's like the most fulfilling, natural, like energizing routine I could possibly imagine. And compared to that other world, the UN world, the New York world, like I'm probably like the least productive looking person. But I think I kind of found a way, again, through all of these support systems and teachers, to detour to true happiness and true peace. And I'm not perfect and I'm not peaceful and happy every moment, but I have these tools that I go back to when I'm feeling off. And they often always get me right back into this sense of groundedness and belief, like, wow, everything is exactly how it's meant to be. So that's a little bit of my transition story that kind of hits on a couple different beliefs that I have and philosophies that I bring into the coaching with other people.
I have so many questions.
So do I, because that feels like a different person when I tell the story.
All right. So I guess, all right, my first question is, it's difficult for a lot of people to be in a great situation, whether it's based on finances and you feel secure, or whether it's based on routine because now it's something that you're used to and you've sort of molded yourself into this person because this is what you do every day and this is what you do on the weekends, right? Like we get into that routine. And so when you were at your job at the UN and then you transitioned into Brazil, and that lifestyle of that different culture, I assume that kind of started seeping in, and that's kind of what got the juices flowing where you were like, all right, this feels different. Like you kind of look at that and you're like from my perspective, if I were you and I were in the UN job, I'd be like, oh, I don't even know if a lifestyle like that is sustainable, because I'd be comparing it to like what I'm doing every single day. It's so far away. But when you like get dropped in that sort of culture and that environment, and you're seeing evidence that it is sustainable to have a different kind of lifestyle and a different kind of life, how much of that gave you, I don't want to put it this way, but gave you, I'll say it this way, either the strength or courage or evidence that you needed to have in order to really understand and step up and say, hey, I want something different?
Yeah. I'm so grateful you're pulling out that line of the story, because I never really saw that as like, it's almost such a big part of the rest of the journey that I never gave that credit as part of it. Meaning if I hadn't left New York, if I hadn't made that first request, I don't know if I'd be sitting where I'm sitting right now. Maybe, probably it might've been just a different twist and turns, meaning like that sense of this isn't a fit for me, this lifestyle and this job isn't a fit, probably wouldn't have gone away. But I don't know if it would have happened as fast or as direct as it followed. So the answer is yes. Like, and actually travel is absolutely one of the tools. It's not one of the 8 ones that, in terms of daily lifestyle habits that I talked about, but it's absolutely like a feature of this more free, authentic lifestyle that I do live. Travel's a huge part of it. Like there's getting out of my comfort zone, like being forced. There's just something so energizing from being in a country where like I don't fully speak the language. And one of my aspirations and like commitments to myself is to learn the local language when I go to live somewhere new. And I think it's that challenge in the beginning that like, it's so enlivening. And on some levels, the other side, it's like super scary to be breaking up the day to day. I'm at the same time someone who loves routine. Even this last move to Europe a couple of weeks ago, like the jet lag and the reverse of my schedule, like it's been having an impact. But the answer is like, yes, being able to see a different culture, also a culture. I mean, Brazilians are just so warm. And I remember some things that had an impact on me was, my boyfriend at the time, I mean, he came from, I don't know what the technical level of poverty is, but like, he didn't come from much, right? Like kind of a traditional family in Sao Paulo, like not from a lot of money, like, grandma and brother, like everyone lives in this one tiny home. And like, that one never like bothered me, even though it looked very different from like how I grew up in New Jersey. And I think that might've been other travel experiences I had before dating him. But I think you're right. Like just seeing that life can be different, that there was a strong emphasis on the importance of family. There was this alegria, like this happiness. I happened to be around there during Carnival too. So like I got to dance in the Carnival parade in Sao Paulo, and like, I just got a different sense of what could matter in life. And that doesn't mean there's not, very business oriented, like similarly fast-paced people in Sao Paulo and Brazil. There certainly are, but I guess I got an experience of it that was just out of these confines of what success means, or what I thought it meant growing up in New Jersey and living in the East Coast, and sort of being around just one type of culture, one type of success, one type of, this is how we do things, after you graduate college and you do that, then you do that. So yeah, it plays a huge role. And again, I don't know where that creative idea came from. Like, I should go to Brazil. Like, it really all started with that question. And I guess the willingness to hear no, because that's really what it took for me to ask, like being okay if my boss said no. And for some reason she said yes. So I will forever be grateful for her trusting me, and whatever else happened in that moment that made that opportunity happen.
Yeah, it's interesting because I know that you help coaches coach their best, in the sense that if we are grounded and we are practicing your 8 principles, which we'll talk about, if we're healthy, then we can better serve our clients. And outside of coaching, if you're just healthy in general, you can better serve others, and you can, be more either just productive as a person. I don't necessarily mean in like tangible ways either, just showing up for life. You're more lit up for life, and more integrated in life. When you have, you talked a little bit about like either doing the side hustle, or you kind of put yourself in a situation where you can sort of pivot and then go full force into a coaching business. To be the person who is doing the full-time job, who takes the side hustle route, and then there's this extra layer of, okay, I need to be good to myself. I need to get healthy, and I need to get healthy now, because there's no way I could do even the side hustle with the full-time job if I'm not healthy. Like, I'm going to crash and burn, right? Yeah. And then that person's dream is to have a different lifestyle, but maybe they've never lived that lifestyle before. Maybe they have no idea what it feels like. They've never really touched it before. They're just dreaming like, oh, that must be better. If someone's like in that sort of situation, and now maybe we can talk about the 8 principles. And if I'm saying that wrong, I'm sorry, but I know you have 8 factors that lead.
Yeah, I haven't figured out the right phrasing either. So principles works just as well.
The great 8. Okay, we're gonna use the great 8. But
oh, I like that.
How do you influence a person using those 8 principles to find that balance if they're going to go that route?
Yeah. So let me start with kind of my overall philosophy. And so the first thing I would invite this person to do is to consider a different belief about who they are, what they're here to do, and the source of their energy, creativity, success. So my philosophy is that we're actually conduits. We channel creative energy from whatever we want to call it, universal energy, source, universal intelligence, God, like whatever that thing is that all the great religions and mystics are try to connect with and identify. These 8 practices for me are ways of like cleaning up the blocks that I believe modern life have created to us no longer being plugged into that energy source. So I'll start there by saying it's believing and trusting that if you put your attention on changing what you eat, that's directly related to your ability to be more confident in a sales conversation or write your book or have that sense of trust and faith that if you quit your job, within 3 months, you're going to figure it out, because that energy is going to keep flowing through you to give you new ideas and be open to opportunities that come across. So that's like the first step, is to just kind of buy into this belief that it's your energy that matters most. And if you put your attention on energizing yourself and doing things that feel natural, and that's kind of like, for me, the sources of energy are very natural things of being human. So I often talk about those 8 areas as like basic human needs. If these 8 human needs are met, I am like firing on all 8 cylinders. If some of them are like kind of not really nourished and some of them are completely not even present in my life, like I'm just cut off from the energy source that I need as a human being to be my full potential, my full self. And I also have a belief that like we all have the capacity to be operating in that super, super high level. And in more of a business language, what we would call this like high performance living, high performance thinking. Like there's a lot of different applications of what focusing on how you're eating, how you're moving, who you're spending your time with, are you being outside of nature, like what that energy could do for you in the material world. So the first thing is like is believing like you are a conduit for creative energy. And so your only job is to nourish yourself and like kind of like watering the plant, like water your plant so that you can receive that creative energy, which will lead you to do all of these creative endeavors that you feel called to do and that you want to do. Secondly, and the first thing I do when I sit down with a potential client is I say like, well, what's your ideal lifestyle? Like walk me through a perfect day from morning to night. You wake up, from the time you wake up to the time you go to bed. What are you doing? And so that usually reveals to me, and that reveals to somebody like, this is what getting there looks like. It's having the ability to go through a day doing and feeling all of these things that I really love to do and these ways that I want to feel. And then from there, like that's a beautiful place to backwards plan in a way, because now you have articulated what your personal definition of success is. So that, to me, that is success, to be able to live a day doing things that you love to do and feeling super energized and at peace and happy and all of these things. Like we could talk about what sort of material things are in your world or like achievements at that point, but like they kind of don't really matter. What matters most is that you loved what you did that day. So then from there, I would suggest a person to analyze what parts of their life are not being nourished, because that's the lifeline to 3 things I notice myself repeating about those 8 areas. Those 8 areas, when they're nourished, when they're fulfilled, they give energy, like actual, real, physical, mental energy, which leads to clarity. So mental clarity on whether that's, we want to call it clarity and alignment with your intuition, or clarity on what you want and what you don't want. Whatever it is, like when we are in clarity, we're almost unstoppable because we know exactly what needs to be done. It's when we're in confusion and we're at odds with what we think we should be doing versus what we want to be doing, that's when we get stuck and we can't progress, or we're making decisions that are at odds with what we really want or are actually healthy for ourselves. So these 8 areas give energy, they give clarity. And and all of this, by the way, I developed by just reflecting on myself. Like I literally sat down at a moment, this was like 2.5 years ago. And I was like, how do I have such energy, clarity, and confidence? Like, what is it that I'm doing that is creating this consistent feeling of energy, clarity, and confidence? And for me, the confidence is the courage to be fully who you are, to ask for the things that you want, to say no to the things that you don't want. And when I say want, like, I'm not really talking about this selfish, narcissistic place. Like when you're really plugged in with this energy, everything that you want is what's best for you, is what's best for the people around you and what's best for the earth and the world. So it was these areas I realized, like, oh, energy, clarity, and confidence. Like, what we all want is confidence, because if we have confidence, we feel like we can do and create whatever we want. But in order to get to confidence, you need to have clarity. And in order to get to clarity, you often need to clean up your energy. So I would sit with someone, and this is really what I do, and say, like, let's start to just be aware of how you're currently thinking and feeling in these 8 areas of life. And so what I use with clients, which is in the process of becoming a book, and the book is really a self-coaching tool that I'm still working through my own clarity on, like, what exactly it needs to look like to be as impactful and useful as possible. Because the last thing I'm going to do is just throw another book into the personal development world that, like, isn't actually actionable. But what I currently use with clients is, like, literally a Google document of this chart of 8 areas of life that I'll walk you through in a second. And the tool goes like this: rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10. Like, how nourished are you in that area? So for example, the first one is eating clean. And I offer a couple guiding questions, like, okay, when did you cook with fresh whole ingredients this week? When did you eat for fuel versus eating to fulfill another emotional need? So the point there is, like, rather than saying, here are all the healthy things you should be doing, and if you're not doing them, you should beat yourself up and feel bad about it, or you're an idiot. Rather than that, I believe with just self-awareness of what you're doing and how you're feeling about it, like how you physically feel in your body, as well as some of them are more emotional, but some of them are literally, like, physically, how are you feeling? Your brain starts to get, like, oh, when I eat that thing, for example, for me, if I have dairy, like, I feel like total shit. My whole body has, like, a headache. So I have learned over time, like, I'm not going to ever touch ice cream again because it's not worth it. Now, I could have made that decision because, you know, keto and paleo and the bulletproof guy and all this stuff tells me I shouldn't eat dairy. And that's all true for a reason. But what matters most is, what is my experience in my body with these habits? So over time, and, like, it's actually very quick, like, even just, I think, once or twice reflecting on these areas, you basically get to see, okay, where am I draining my energy and where are there opportunities for energy? And so the second part of the tool is to look forward to the next week and say, do that exact reflection. Like, okay, what was my highest ranking area of life? Okay, my highest ranking area was practice mindfulness, because I meditated every day and I journaled every day. And, like, I was just across the board, like, I had a great mindful morning spiritual practice. Okay, what was my lowest area? Well, my lowest area was, so one that is often low for me personally is play, which is both an energy of a way of being, but also, like, did I go out and play Frisbee outside, or did I go to that dance class? And that's kind of the other thread of this, is, like, the point is not to be perfect in all 8 areas all the time. And so that's always an interesting, like, meta level coaching moment I have with clients, is when they start to think or use it in that way, then it's like its own discussion around perfectionism and all that sort of stuff. The point is just self-awareness. And, like, if you can map on a weekly basis, and that's what I suggest, is, like, every week, just sit and have a reflection moment with yourself about where you're putting your energy or where you didn't put your energy and attention, and then plan forward next week. So the last part of the tool is looking forward, like, what's, you know, what's possible if you put your energy in that lowest area? Like, what would it take to create the conditions for you to put your energy in that area? And so then I watch people, and I've used it myself as a planning tool, to go beyond just like goals and business and like very professional minded things, to like look at your life holistically and say, like, I'm going to go to 2 yoga classes, or I'm going to go for a walk in the park during lunch. And what I find and what I believe is like, those are just as important as any business minded productivity hack, whatever, for you to be more successful and creative, and a better leader at your job. They're just different tools and different, I think tools is the best word, because that's really what they are.
So run us quickly down the 8. I know you mentioned eating clean was the first. Can you just run down the list of the others?
Yeah. If it's okay with you, I because it's both so simple. So the working title of the book is Simply Human, because I believe these are just simply very human ways of being and needs that in modern life we've forgotten sometimes, and just in keeping up with the pace of life. And that's not only in like a rat race kind of job, like any job, even the world of entrepreneurship. It's so easy to just continue to not slow down and not think about these areas of life. So anyway, because there's 8 of them, and that's not that simple as much as the kind of the overall philosophy is, I kind of did my best to pull out bullet points. So as I'm speaking to you, I'm just sort of pulling up the part of my website where I'll say the area and then like the 3 parts of it that for me describe like what that means. Okay, so here we go. We've got eat clean. So love cooking, hack your health, drink less. So for me, alcohol and social drinking is actually a big part of that conversation. I think it's one of the biggest energy killers that we sometimes just on autopilot include in our life in ways that we probably don't even really enjoy it or realize where it's negative. So that's definitely part of it. So the second lifestyle habit is be active. So slip in daily sweat, create a lifestyle of fun, and balance intensity with rest. So are you working out, or are you also doing like rejuvenated practices, whether that's yoga or massage or whatever? The third is to be in nature. So plan weekend getaways, leverage the outdoors. Digital detox is a part of this, which actually kind of belongs in the mindfulness section. But basically realizing we're human beings of the earth. We're not meant to be inside of our apartments and our offices all day long. And I only know that to be true is because when I'm inside for more than a set of hours, I like my energy literally, it's funny because I'm saying that this is a source of energy, but sometimes there's an overabundance of energy that needs to be released. And so actually some of these practices are practices to release the energy and cycle it through. So for me, being in nature sometimes can be a place to plug into creativity and get inspiration. And sometimes it's a place to almost detox and relax and kind of just refill with sunlight and feet on the grass or the sand and fresh air. So the fourth habit is what I call sex freely. So this one is certainly probably the most taboo. And, you know, when you read that, it's kind of like, what does that even mean? So, you know, my 3 bullets here are love your body. So part of it is just like going through a process of just like really loving your physical sexual self, own your sex drive and ask for what you want. So for me, sex freely, it's kind of like playfulness where it's both, it's about the act of sex and owning that as a basic human need. And we have a need for just physical connection and intimacy with other humans, however you choose to, you know, get that in your life, which was a big part of my own journey. And actually the coaching work that I did with my coach, Monica, was very much focused on that, like realizing I didn't realize I had so much shame around sex. And that's a whole nother conversation we could have. But when I opened that part of my life up and realized it's just as important as eating clean, a huge part of my confidence, I think, came from opening up that area of life. So now for me, sex really means being able to bring that sexual, creative, almost sensual energy to everything I touch, every person I meet. And so it's also about separating sex from a sensual energy, and the sexual sensual energy is life energy, you know, and the yogis talk about that in your chakra, your second chakra being business and your sex area. So sex freely. The fifth one is cultivate mindfulness. So connect with your intuition, create space for silence, practice gratitude and prayer. So this is really where, you know, I talked a little earlier about how like I feel the spirit side of me has grown even more than the other business side. How has that happened? Well, it's been having a very diligent morning mindfulness routine, which honestly right now is more of a spiritual routine. And, you know, we can talk about mindfulness from the spirit or the scientific area, but the point is having a moment in your life where you pause, you slow down, you reflect. The best tools to do that are meditation, journaling, prayer. I usually throw yoga into the mindfulness bucket. So that's the fifth one. The sixth one is play. So do what you love for fun, laugh often, and take risks trying new things. So not only planning in your life things you're going to do just for the sake of having fun, but again, consciously bringing in that playful energy to a business conversation or a meeting or a coaching call, or a serious conversation you're going to have with your partner. So I had mentioned that this one's actually the most challenging for me because I feel very deep and like always looking for the meaning in things. And so I know that like this is one of the tools that when I do have it in my life, it does like surge my energy, even though my energy is quite high consistently because most of these things are in place. And then the last two is live in purpose. So add value to others, access your flow state, and enjoy making lots of money. So it's funny because actually on my website right now, I have live in purpose and prosperity. And even when I said that money piece, like it didn't fully resonate with me. The truth is money is part of that. And I'm still, you know, I'm in a phase of like trying to really understand what is my true relationship with money. And I think it's something we're all working at in some level. What live in purpose, and I'm going to go back to what it fundamentally was, which was live in purpose. The philosophy is if you're doing what feels is your calling, is your purpose, which for me looks like the things that put you in flow, where you just feel like you're channeling something. For me, when I'm coaching and I'm writing, I feel like I'm channeling. If you do that, the money will follow. And so the point is to not be starving artists, but to be masters at the craft that you do and trust when you do it at a really high level with a high level of commitment, like abundance and all those things are going to follow into your life. And so that's where I help someone figure out like, well, what would you love to do all day long from a professional perspective? Like, how would you love to make money? And then the last one is being connection and community. So deepen relationships, tell the truth, and feel like you belong to something. And so at the end of the day, all of these other areas, if you're not, you know, I had a friend, that same friend who gave me the blog and the coach. Oh, she always has said like the quality of your life is equal to the quality of your relationships. And there was a time a couple of years ago where I heard that, but I didn't get it. And it's funny because as this journey has changed over the past 4 years, and I didn't even really mention the part where when I transitioned into coaching, I also decided I wanted to live in a new beach around the world every 6 months, was the mission, and the mission I'm still on. I've been having seasons of my own growth in each of these 8 areas. Mm-hmm. So like the health, the eat clean and the be active and be in nature, like those were kind of already part of my life before I even started coaching. And then the sex freely part came, or first the mindfulness came, then the sex freely part came. And then it wasn't really until like 2 years ago, the connection came, and I had my heart broken for the first time. And then I fell in love a couple months later. And then a few months after that, I met my now partner that I'm in this apartment with in Germany. And my point is that I learned that, yes, it is true. Like the quality of relationships are what really matter. But there was a phase in my life where I didn't get that. Like most of my default, and I still even have this very independent drive in me that like I think that I can do everything on my own and be self-sufficient. But the truth is, the moments today when all of those other kind of more basic lifestyle habits are all intact, I will still be cutting myself off from the level of fulfillment and creative energy that I know that I'm capable of, because connection and community aren't in my life. So I'm currently in a phase where connection's there, but community isn't. Um, and that's kind of, again, I think we're all kind of learning these 8 areas at different timelines and different moments and different phases. Like, I'm in a phase where I both know so desperately what's missing is community in my life, and yet I haven't figured out, or I haven't yet found, I feel like I haven't been to that place where I feel like, okay, yes, this is the place I want to lay roots. So I still feel like I'm, for whatever reason, on this wanderlust journey. But that would be the final lifestyle habit that would round out a really whole, healthy, happy life, is to spend a lot of time not only in your community, but building community and just feeling like you belong to something bigger than yourself. And that could be something virtual or something in your industry and professional. But what I'm personally seeking is a physical place where I feel connected to the other humans in that area, and, you know, do things in person with them to have this sense of community. So I feel like I'm waffling on about these 8 areas, but I will just say that they are super simple and free, and they work, and you don't have to trust me that they work. You can just go on my website and look at the 8 areas and start to keep your attention on them. And notice that when you make changes, like, you just instantly and infinitely feel more energized, and more grounded and more confident in yourself.
So I love that you went through them, because they are really so important. It's funny, I bet a lot of viewers are like, oh, you know, I've focused on that one before. I've focused on that one before, you know, and it's interesting to kind of just collectively look at them and say, and see how powerful they can all be if they're all operating at sort of an optimal level, right? And so so the whole time you were talking, I was like thinking about this. Right now I'm writing a book, and one of the themes in that book talks about energy, and it talks about energy from, you know, sort of a high to low spectrum, almost like with music, right? If you were to take a piano and kind of tilt it vertically, you know, if you took the top of the piano, you'd hear higher notes, and if you kind of ran your finger down, you'd go all the way down to the lower notes, right? So sound is a spectrum like that. Energy is a spectrum like that, or we could see that one philosophy is we could see energy as a spectrum like that as well. And then it's like, okay, how am I showing up today? You know, not to judge myself, but okay, where am I, like, on the spectrum? Like, what level am I sort of at, you know? And then it's sort of like, okay, at the same time, not just the level, but throughout my day, like, how high and low am I going within the spectrum? You know, is my energy really high, or is my energy really low? Is that happening multiple times a day? And how fast is that happening? Does that happen within a day, within a week, within a month, or more, right? So now you have, like, it's not just energy and how you show up. It's almost like all 3 of those factors, like almost like a 3D model of how your energy operates. And so one component of all of this, of managing that, are like what I'm calling regulators. Okay. So you can have, let's say you have someone who's more low. If they go to a doctor, that doctor might say, oh, you're clinically depressed, and they might suggest a medication for them. Or someone might show up and they're like, you know, I just did the most crazy stuff. Let me tell you about all the, you know, all the things that I did that I felt out of control about. Okay, well, you know, maybe you have this diagnosis, and we're going to try this medication, right? So medication can be one regulator. Another regulator that people may go to is using some kind of substance, like a legal substance, whether it be alcohol or some kind of drug, right? And so that if we're looking at them as channels, maybe the medication stuff is in the middle, then we have the alcohol and the drugs, illegal drugs, something like that, or even prescription drugs that are being abused. But then we have this third channel that's like, we'll call it a holistic channel or a natural channel. And I can't not think about like the 8 areas that you're talking about as like a counterbalance to especially the illegal drugs or prescription drug abuse, you know, that substance abuse. And then, you know, it's an argument either way. People have their opinions whether prescription medication is actually necessary or not, but we'll keep that sort of out of the picture here for a second. So when you take the energy in those 3 different levels, the level, the range, and the frequency, and you marry it up against some kind of regulator, whether it's in the holistic channel, whether it's in the medication, or whether it's in sort of the abuse and we'll call it addiction channel, right? Like how, if we use medication to the point of where we kind of go off the charts, and if we use drugs to the point of where we can go off the charts, and our energy is like either really high and now we're like shooting into the stratosphere with our energy vibrating like this, and maybe we don't feel like we're even grounded to earth, and we're just kind of lifting off, or the opposite, and we're feeling feelings of maybe not wanting to be around anymore or something, if we're really, really low. Like, how are we using that holistic channel to regulate to almost a balance? And is it possible to even achieve balance if the holistic channel even goes too high? It's a complicated question, but I guess what I'm really asking is like, where is the balance even in the holistic part of things?
Well, I'm a couple of things are coming up, and I'm happy you brought it up, because one, I need to call myself out that, and my coach Monica used to always say this, like, I have a preference, and I think part of it is living in a culture that has a preference for the high energy things, meaning like I am always seeking, if I'm not feeling like at that super high creative, like I just feel awesome level, my first thought is to think like something's wrong. So part of this practice is realizing when you're not high energy, it doesn't mean something's wrong. It could mean one of these 8 areas are low in your life, but it could also mean they're low in your life for a reason. So there's like a whole level of, for me, is like only a spiritual conversation of like dark nights of the soul and challenges or illnesses, or like all of these things meaning to happen for whatever your, you know, soul blueprint and your journey is meant to be, for who you are in this world, who the spirit of you are in this world, like that you're meant to have. So by no means do I think like if you're not living high energy, applying the holistic regulators all the time, that like something's wrong with you. And I have to remind myself of that, because the real goal, I think, for me is to be okay for when there's low energy. But when I can identify, maybe it's just more of like, again, that meaning understanding. If I can identify why I feel low energy today, I feel less of like a something's wrong feeling. It's like, oh, I haven't been outside. Like, of course I feel freaking crazy yesterday. So that's the first thing, is like, let me be clear, by no means is this about let's be high energy all the time. And if you're not, then something's wrong with you, or you're just not doing enough personal development, productivity hacks by any means. I think it's about acknowledging that the human experience is highs and lows, and they're cyclical. The second thing I'll say, in my experience and the people I've worked with, it seems as when most of these holistic regulators are working, meaning they're being nourished, the result is relatively consistent high energy with like a little natural fluctuation, but more or less a sense of waking up in the morning and feeling really clear on who you are, what you want, what you're meant to do. So I would say, and I don't know like what the spectrum, like if depression is really low energy, like I don't, it would certainly be above a neutral line. Like I don't think it leads to a neutral life, at least for me. It leads to like a very inspired life, consistently over time, but not perfectly every day. Because the other part, especially like, for example, connection or purpose, if you're doing that, you're doing challenging work in the world. Like you are putting yourself out on the line and taking risks and failing socially, emotionally, and or professionally. So there are definitely moments where you feel like shit. But overall, that, like, for example, purpose, you are highly engaged in whatever you're doing professionally. So overall, you're feeling really motivated and energized and inspired by the work that you're doing. So that's the second thing, is like, generally I find it to be a quite high, consistent level of energy, but within what I would call like just the normal human continuum or range of high and low. And I think that's part of it, is like to realize to be human. And that's kind of the book has a play in words, like simply human. If I originally was calling it superhuman, 2 words, as a response to what I feel like is a culture of being superhuman and trying to tell us that, like, to go beyond our humanness. Whereas the point of the 8 areas in the book is, no, embrace the fact that you're human and you have these limitations, and know what they are and nurture them. And if you do that, you'll consistently feel like you're in the exact right place at the exact right time, and that you're healthy and happy. Even if in that moment, you know, like, okay, so my energy was really low for a week or so because partly was jet lag and partly was not being out in nature and partly was I realizing I wasn't in full connection with my partner. Like, there's some things happening in our relationship, and I didn't really know what I was feeling until 2 days ago. And then I had that really honest conversation with him, and the energy I had yesterday was like through the roof. Now I know it's because of that conversation, which for me is in the connection box of like being fully honest and telling the truth and what I'm thinking and what I'm feeling. So it's accepting that there's a normal range, and I hate the word normal, because at the same time, like, what is normal? Mm-hmm. And that's the other paradox in this for me, is like, on some level, I think we're all these unique spirits, and who am I to tell you what your journey or what highs and lows you're meant to have? And at the same time, I believe we're fundamentally all really, really, really similar as human beings, like as the species that we are. And therefore, I do believe, and I see these areas are immensely helpful to every and any human being, no matter what your personality or your condition or your childhood was. And that's kind of a delicate paradox, right? Because we want to, I want to believe, and I do believe, that we're unique and special, but I also believe that we like over personalize conditions or issues or illnesses or whatever. And if we just realize it's our modern living that's creating those illnesses, like, we could clean that up without needing any label, any medication, whatever. So I think you're spot on to say, like, this is a third vertical of a holistic regulator. Just don't expect it to put you in euphoria 24/7, because that's not the human experience. The human experience is both sides.
Yeah, I mean, I think the point is maybe 2 things. Finding balance, and you get to decide what balance is, right? Like you were saying, if most people think this is like normal or neutral, and you feel like you operate best just a little bit above that because everything's flowing, everything feels good. Well, for you, that might be exactly where you want to be. And maybe when you are experiencing sort of highs and lows, it's sort of like a gradual this, right? Mm-hmm. You get to decide where you feel best. That's what's so brilliant about being human, right? We get to, you can follow a paleo diet if you want to, but if there's something on that paleo diet that doesn't feel right to you, you get to make up whatever diet you want based on how your body's reacting, right? Yeah. So, I think like the other thing that we were kind of talking about, but didn't maybe specifically mention, is when we're trying to find that balance, find what's right for us, mm-hmm. We do have to be gentle with ourselves, mm-hmm. right? If we have a day where it's like lower, like maybe we just need that rest. Maybe the creative juice that was flowing, the few days before needs to recharge itself before it starts flowing nicely again. Like a lot of times I think in society, we look at ourselves and we say, oh, I didn't produce as much as I could have, or I didn't show up as bright as I could have, or, it's so easy to look at where the possible fault is and then mm-hmm. punish ourselves for the fault instead mm-hmm. of saying, oh, well, that was what it was. And I was who I was.
Mm-hmm.
I'm feeling this now. And instead of going to the beach right now, like I really need a nap, and
Yeah.
not feeling guilty for taking a nap.
Yeah.
Um, and so I love what we've been talking about today, because I think it is so easy to go to a regulator that might serve us for a short period of time, but doesn't serve us in the long run,
Mm-hmm.
or one that maybe even damages us. Those regulators are so readily available, and even like a quick fix diet, even if we're talking about that. So it, it's so easy to go there. And when I look at the holistic channel, the 8 areas that you've outlined, part of me feels like, oh God, that's a lot of work. But if
Yeah.
I think back to like all the things that I've tried to like regulate my mood and regulate myself, and it's just like I think back and I'm like, wow, what a waste of time and what a waste of energy.
Yeah.
And so if I can find balance within a holistic approach that feels right to me and is customized to me, what better way to do that?
Looking at the 8 areas and thinking like, wow, that's a lot of work. I totally get that. And I want to posit that because this is a lifestyle, like we are all living a lifestyle. We are all eating a certain way. We are moving or not moving. Like either we're eating paleo or we're eating a lot of grains and dairy. Either we're active at some point during the day, or we literally don't get up from our office chair and then we go sit on the couch and watch TV. Like we're doing one or the other. So it's less about, even with mindfulness, either we're meditating and we're journaling, or we are living with the constant anxious, like monkey mind all day long. Like we think that we don't have, like we think that it's more work to maybe change the habit, but it's a lot of work to maintain the current not like health producing habit that we have.
Yeah, and I think the hardest is the person who is in both camps,
Mm-hmm.
because it's a constant like swaying this way, swaying that way, swaying this way, swaying that way, and then it's like you wake up and it's like, okay, how am I eating today? Right?
Yeah.
And you've just like stripped your entire kitchen down to just healthy foods, and then you're like, I really have to eat this.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's just one example, but it's like, for the people who find themselves in both camps, like they're trying to do the journaling, and then it's like they got 3 nights in a row where they traveled, and it's like, I'm not doing the journaling, and then it's like, oh, I had 4 days of meditation starting off my morning, and then it's like they've got an early trip into the office, and so, well, I can't do that, and then it's like a week later and they're still not doing the meditation again. Like it's just, like the whole time we've been having this conversation, I've been thinking about the person who is kind of in the and.
Yeah.
Because like we said before, to really step into that new life that maybe they don't even know what that feels like we talked about, they can't touch it yet. To like really step into that new life that they want, it's reasonable to do all the things that are right for them, because maybe certain pressures have come off. Maybe they're not addicted to looking at their email anymore. Maybe they have the time to walk the beach every morning. It's a different world. But when you're kind of tethered in both, that's I think is the true challenge of how you either sustain both and live in moderation, a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and find how that works, or you segue to what you really want. And so we could talk forever. We could talk forever. But
Can I give you one thought there though? Well, 2 thoughts. One is, for me, it's a both and. It's focus on one of them. Like look at one energy source. Maybe it's changing the way that you eat, and just note, like really commit for 30 days. I fully support a paleo diet with a level of sustainability, meaning like, no, don't eat bacon every day. Really think about how the cavemen ate. Like we didn't eat meat every day. So there is some wisdom, I think, in the vegan world. if you can marry the two, like for me, cutting out wheat and dairy and alcohol, like will be life-changing in just the immediate energy you're going to have and the mental clarity you'll have. So it's that. And then in the moments where you're not, because that is part of the habit change process, you're not perfect. The both and for me is like focus on the food. And in the moment where you cheated, or like you just didn't eat the things you wanted to eat, like rely on the other 7 areas, like go for a walk outside, call a girlfriend. Those are still in your toolbox. So you don't stay focused on how you fucked up or weren't good enough and are beating yourself up over you didn't eat fully clean. Does that make sense? Sort of the both and of it?
Yeah. And so I'm thinking about the people that need help with this.
Mm-hmm.
And so I want to be able to direct them to you. So I want you to tell us how we can work with you, so that if someone might look at your website and be like, great, this is great information. But for the person who says, I desperately need to work with Christine, how do we do that?
Yeah. So that's a great way to end it. Because the second point I wanted to share was reflecting now the importance of connection. I'm not able to sit here in this chair right now and speak to you and articulate those areas and be creating a tool that I hope will help hundreds and thousands of people if I didn't work with my own coach. My coach for me was connection. Out of all of those things, it was a human being where I could show up weekly who fully saw me, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and who fully believed in me and helped me cultivate all these areas of myself. Now, when I met her, was I already eating clean and meditating? Yeah, I was. But would I have ever been able to create what I've created entrepreneurially or developed into the coach that I am? Absolutely not. Would I have put down my barriers to resisting love and be in this great relationship? Absolutely not. So part of my call here is like, it's not a sell for coaching. It's a sell for having an intimate relationship in your life. And for me, coaching was the vehicle that gave that to me, when for whoever I was in the moment, I couldn't have it with a friend or a colleague or a boyfriend or whatever. Like I needed that special space. So that is what I provide for people, is just a place to be fully seen, fully heard, and a laboratory for experimenting. I'm so big on experiments in all of these different areas of life. So I think the 2 main ways to work together, one is you go to my website. If you click it's christineconforti.com. So just follow my name.com. If you click on the tab that says self-coaching, there is an excerpt of the preface of the book that outlines those 8 areas. Sign up there, not only to get the second part of the first chapter I'm offering, but like to stay up to date when I actually publish the book, which will be hopefully in the next 6 months is the plan and the timeline. That is an instant access to the self-coaching tool. Like my vision is that in terms of this holistic regulator, people just pick up the book and coach themselves to wholeness and nourishment in these 8 areas. And maybe don't even need a coach at that level. Just trying to get to sanity and health in their personal life. The second way is if you're interested in trying a deep coaching conversation, which is how I work. There's a form under private coaching where you can submit a request for a coaching conversation. There's a set of reflection questions. I invite you to be as honest and open as possible, and I'll get an email alert from that, and I'll follow up with some insights and some next steps from there.
Love it. Love it. And I know
Thank you. This was fun. I just felt like we were having this awesome conversation. I kind of forgot that we were here like recording something.
That's what I do, baby.
Oh, you do. It's because we were both in flow.
So I want to thank you so much for being here, Christine. And I want to thank our viewers for being here. I hope you guys love this conversation. No matter what you do, who you are, where you are, it's so important for our health to come first. If we're not healthy, we really can't produce anything. We really can't go anywhere. We really can't show up as who we're meant to be. So I hope at least the 8 areas, they're so profound. Hopefully you at least take that as a takeaway. If you want to take it a step further, go to christineconforti.com, poke around there, fill out the forms that she suggested. And, I've spent a lot of time with Christine and she's absolutely lovely. I think you've seen that today. So if you want to work with her, definitely consider that and definitely reach out to her. Just reach out even to say hi. She's so she's so wonderful, and she'll just brighten your day no matter what. The second we came on today and I saw that smile, I felt 1,000 times better today. So hopefully she will do that for you as well. So that's it for us. Again, Christine, thank you so much, and we'll see you guys next time.
Bye.
Do you have a couple pillows that you could put there?
Right now you see pillows?
I don't see pillows.
I mean, the more I move the plant, the more it's like covering the bed.
Move the plant a little bit towards that wall, a little bit more. Push it just a little bit more. Yeah. Ooh, yeah. If you can move your head, see how you can see like the start of the close?
See the clothes?
No. Keep twisting.
I mean, I could close the curtains. I guess it's better with. Is that better?
No. If you move the sunlight towards that left side,
Does this light make a difference?
maybe shut the curtains together, but keep it open on that left side.
That way?
Yeah, right there.
Should I put my headphones in, or is it better without it?
I think it's better audio.
Let me just see what it looks like with my headphones in. There's construction going on next door.
Do you want to shut the door or no?
Can you hear stuff? All right, let's try that. All right, let me just put my phone on airplane mode.